And then you come to this, and it's like, well, are we particles, or is it a wave?
Yeah.
It's both. And if we can be authentic with both, then we can meet as these exquisite individual expressions of being, which are individual, and different centers of consciousness, arising from the one field, the one wave. And then, rather than being, we have the experience of being conscious and meeting as separate perspectives, and also being connected, so we're separate and not separate. And when we're separate and not separate, that's when the love arises, it seems to me. When we get them both, that's love. You just feel, yeah, I love you because we are separate and not separate.
So the recognition of love in everything, or...
Yeah, and by love I do mean that's nice, but I mean love seems very big to me, because love is the thing which brings the two together as one, but they're still two. And it's like it's that dance or conversation or lovemaking. It's lovemaking, is a perfect example of it. So love exists on all these different levels, from sex to personal love to your children to your friends, and then there's this universal deep love, which is just for everything. Now that's not the same, it doesn't have that personal quality, because it's no personal relationship, but it has a universal quality, and it's still there. And it means you can even love your enemies. It just means there's a love of being, not a liking necessarily, which means that love can also embrace suffering. In fact, it seems to me, and a lot of spirituality seems to be about getting rid of suffering, but it seems to me that love entails suffering.
Entails?
Suffering.
And what's entails?
Oh, it involves suffering. When I love my children,
yeah, that
and
automatically means
I'm taking a risk.
Yeah.
Which is, if I love them, and if they, if something terrible happens to them, I am going to suffer when they suffer, and I'm willing to take that risk for love.
But the only way to love is to know that it's going to include pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, what's happened is that in the West, a whole generation, and my generation, the generation before, started to wake up, looked around at Western spirituality, when this isn't going to do it. It hasn't got what I'm looking for. And swept away this kind of moribund religion and went east, and then imported that pretty much uncritically. So replaced a whole lot of Western religion with Eastern religion. And now I think what needs to happen is we need to present the same critique to those ideas which have become, within a few decades, so embedded that people take them for granted.
Mainstream.
Yeah. I mean, ideas like enlightenment, or you shouldn't be attached, or have no desires, all these Eastern ideas, which are fundamentally anti. The Buddha's got his legs crossed, he's disappearing off. Which these are deep.
Yeah.
But they're one-sided because they're pushing away humanity. See, our humanity is attached. Our humanity does suffer. Our humanity doesn't have its legs up in the air, it has them down on the earth, and it pushes that away. Well, the whole myth of, look, if you do it enough and you're spiritual enough, you don't have to come back here. And you can disappear off the wheel and you're free and all of that. And so we've imported these ideas, and now we need to go through them and go, well, are they just perennial truths, or are they just one culture's way in, which may have some truth and may not? And when we come back then to the Western tradition, it's interesting, isn't it? Here's this guy in the East with his legs up in the air saying you can escape suffering. And then here's this guy in the West tied to a cross, suffering because of love. It's like, okay, so one's imminent, going, actually bring the love in and be willing to suffer, and one's saying, get out, because that's where it is. And my feeling is, look, it's both.
Yeah.
And if we have this paralogical approach, we can go, look, it's both of those. Love being, be loving, and that entails embracing the duality, loving the separateness, which means being willing to be human, but also being willing to see that back here, you are this profound safety, this being which is not caught up in any of this, which is already unattached. So this isn't attached, and this is attached. And this doesn't have to be not attached. This is human, but this isn't attached. And just to see them both, which what I find is, for me, there's a great relief in that, because suddenly the way you already are is fine. You just have to notice something else. It's not that you don't have to make this impossible thing to become something you're not.
It will be a great title for your next book, Loving the Separateness.
Loving the Separateness.
Those 3 words.
Yeah, that's very
Include
good.
everything.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that as
Yeah.
a title. Thank you. Yeah.
So what's the most heard question when you talk to people about this? What's the number one question people ask you?
Ooh. Well, there's not an obvious answer to that question, because
Is it always the big ego thing that I have to get rid of my ego? My ego is hurting me or stuff like that, or I have a big ego, he has a small ego. Is it stuff about that? Or?
What I find is with those things that really is that they kind of crop up without people noticing. I mean, I will actually talk about, look, I don't think this helps, and then I realise that people have got it, and then very quickly they revert to, there's something inside of me which is out to get me.
Yeah, an enemy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they've been told that. You know,
Yeah.
if someone says to you, which is often, you know, you should not be attached to your separateness, you should have no desires, you should stop thinking, you should not be attached, you should, and you inevitably are, then the voice in your head, which is your humanity, is your enemy.
Yeah.
And that's trying to get you, and it's stopping you reaching this. So now you're fighting it. You know, you had troubles before. You've got spirituality. Now you're fighting a civil war in your own head,
Yeah.
with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I suspect nearly all of us have been there because it's been so prevalent, that idea. Disastrous. You know, there isn't. And for me, the twist came when I suddenly realized that little voice in my head, which is going, no, that's my wisdom.
Yeah.
That's my intuitive wisdom going, you've spent 40 years, 50 years trying to be a human, don't let it go now. You know, it's going to die anyway soon, but just hang
Yeah.
on to it now.
Yeah.
Be human.
Yeah.
And now it feels like, oh, thank you for keeping me here.
Yeah.
And letting me see that I'm already this and this. I don't have to let go. In fact, I would say I can only recognize this profound oneness of the deep self, which is one with all, by appearing as this separate thing. And that was a big insight for me, was going, look, this consciousness is separateness. The subject and object is what's the whole of consciousness is predicated on. And in consciousness, I mean, I look around me now, everything I'm conscious of, I'm differentiating. I differentiate you from the chair, from the grass, from me, from the camera, from here, from the sky, from the up, from the down. Consciousness is going, that's how I'm conscious. Mm-hmm. You look at a baby, they're kind of conscious, but they haven't come in, and you see the Buddha. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
But to become conscious, they have to learn to break it all up.
Yeah.
Now the problem is that when we've broken it all up, we get stuck in it.
Yeah.
And that's when we suffer, and it's like this. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's not like, so much of spirituality feels like people are coming to you, you know, when you've finally come in, and they're coming up and going, it's all been a big mistake. You've learned to think, and evolution has 13.5 billion years to get to this thinking individual, and what a fuck up. It's like, we don't want that. It's like, that can't be right. So, what I'm saying is, no, through the separateness, we become conscious. Now that we're conscious, what the spiritual journey is to become conscious of being conscious. That we actually then, because we're aware of all of the separateness, we can go, who's looking? And as we do that, suddenly there's the oneness. Oh, there's a big space of awareness within which everything's arising like a dream. And I am that. And like in a dream, here I'm in the dream, and here I'm the dreamer and it's in me.
Yeah.
And they're both true at once. Which is it? It's both of those. And here, I'm separate, and I'm experiencing the dream from one perspective, like you do in a dream. And then from here, it's all me.
Yeah.
And well, it's not all Tim, because Tim's part of it, but it's all what I am. And then you get this lovely sensation of, okay, so when I look in your eyes, I see the separate form, and which is individual and different, and that's why it's so attractive to me. And then what I'm connecting with through the eyes, I can't see.
No.
Your being. That's the being. And I'm this being that can't be seen looking, and you're the being that can't be seen looking, and then through the looking, the being, which can't be seen, which is out of this, is connecting with itself.
So you sense.
Fabulous.
Yeah. You sense yourself in other other
Yeah.
appearances.
Yeah, that we're separate and not separate.
Yeah.
And then there's that love or compassion or joy or whatever you want
Yeah.
to call that.
So when I shorten your message, could you say, don't fight the world, turn inwards?
Well, I certainly would say, well, see, because I have this paralogical approach, you know, whenever I say one thing, I feel like I've got to say the opposite. So in one way, yeah, I'm saying don't fight the world. Don't fight what's in you. Just it's fine as it is. But I also think there's times when you fight yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to fight yourself to wake up to oneness. You may have to fight yourself to become a better person, to be better to your wife or your husband, to be a better father, to be a better friend, to be all of those things you
Yeah.
may have to work on yourself. But to wake up to what you are, that's not, you don't have to do that. To wake up to what you are, that's already there.
Yeah.
And then when you do, and the way to do that, it is a kind of turning within, but it's also a coming out. Because the two go to, for me, the journey is paralogical. So there's self-realization, and then there's self-expression. There's knowing yourself and showing yourself, if you like. It's the loving being, and then being loving. And these two come together. So that the further I feel like I've woken up to this, the more that love has propelled me into engaging with this. So there's a peace and a passion, and all of these opposites start to come together, and they're happening at the same time.
So is creating, being creative, is that realizing self?
I think so. I think it's the other side of it. So that here it really is a profoundly, ultimately, profoundly passive. You're coming into this place where you're just holding it all within you, just as it is, and it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. You love it just as it is, even the ugly bits. It's just whoa. And then it comes through this, and it's creative, which means that can be better.
Yeah.
Let's change that.
You want to engage.
Let's make
Yeah.
this. Let's
Yeah.
bring this into life. How can I express this funny Tim thing? What can Tim bring to this dance? What verse can he sing?
Let's join.
And those are happening together. It's the knowing and the expressing and the showing.
Yeah. Are your books translated in Dutch? Also this book, The Mystery Experience?
The Mystery Experience is not in Dutch yet.
Oh.
I would love it to be. It's only just come out in English.
You can ask Wim from Samsara. Wim,
It's a fantastic book waiting to be published in Dutch.
I think after this talk, that's a piece of cake. Thank you.